The movie begins with a space crew launching to Mars in a rocket for a 2-year program sponsored by Hyperion, a space agency. The crew consists of Commander Barnett and Doctors Zoe and David. Commander Barnett has been on 2 other missions while Zoe and David are first-timers. Zoe is excited after the launch while David remains calm. They unpack their luggages and Barnett assigns their workstations to them. Zoe opens the shutters and admires the view of outer space. She sees a Harvard sticker on David's bed and plays a prank on him by serving him a drink with a customized mug from Harvard's rivals, Yale. The crew does live communication. Zoe says she never thought she would enter space someday, and when she applied for the program, she was expecting to be rejected. She says she believes medical discoveries in space are also applicable to Earth. David says that he can't bear the thought of being separated from his wife for 2 years, but this is a rare opportunity to do his research that he might never get again. He says his wife supports his decision. He says his research is geared towards maintaining life on Mars. Barnett says that of all the thousands of applications that Hyperion received, Zoe and David were the most qualified for that program. Barnett is inspecting the vitals on the ship when a drop of blood falls on the floor. She discovers the source is the casing covering a device called the carbon dioxide scrubber, which filters carbon dioxide from the atmosphere within the ship. She opens it and a bleeding, unconscious man falls on her arm. The carbon dioxide scrubber starts malfunctioning and she calls for help. The others carry the man to the infirmary while she switches off the device. She asks the headquarters who the man is while he's receiving treatment. Zoe uses a 3D printer to print a splint for Barnett's dislocated arm. Barnett tells them the man's name is Michael Adams and he's part of the launch support crew. Zoe places Barnett's arm in the splint and tells her to wear it for at least 6 weeks. The system notifies the crew that the level of carbon dioxide on the ship is increasing. Barnett asks Zoe and David to use the lithium hydroxide canisters as alternatives for the carbon dioxide scrubber. Michael wakes up and moves around the ship. On reaching the shutters, he develops a panic attack. Zoe rushes in and asks him to breathe to relieve tension. She takes him back to the infirmary and checks his stitches. Barnett asks him how he got into the ship, but he claims to not remember. Michael asks for how long he was unconscious and Barnett tells him at least 12 hours. Michael asks that they turn around and take him back to Earth because of his little sister whom he left behind. Barnett says they've gone too far to turn around but promises to phone Hyperion and ask them to take care of his sister. Michael joins them for dinner and Barnett tells him Hyperion already hired a full-time guardian for his sister. She gives him a few instructions for the mission and Michael promises to do all he can to help out. Zoe shows him the safety procedures on the ship. The next day, Michael helps out David in the lab. While at it, David introduces him to Jazz. Barnett asks Zoe to check out the carbon dioxide scrubber. Zoe reports that it's broken beyond repair. Barnett calls the headquarters and asks them to provide a solution. Barnett calls David for a talk and asks Michael to join Zoe in removing the carbon dioxide scrubber. She tells David to use half of his algae to produce some oxygen for the crew while Hyperion does something about the scrubber issue. After they finish removing the scrubber, Zoe notices blood on Michael's side. She dresses the wound again. David tells Barnett that he's only been able to produce half of the required supply of oxygen needed by the crew. Barnett asks him to use the other half, but David reminds her that he needs them to do his research, which he has waited years for. David says there's no point wasting his materials if the scrubber can still be fixed. Barnett tells him the scrubber is permanently damaged. David reluctantly uses the other half to produce oxygen. Unfortunately, that batch dies off quickly. Michael gets on a call with his sister and tells her his plan to sneak into the ship and join the program worked fine and nobody suspects a thing. Barnett calls the headquarters and asks them for an update. They tell her there's nothing they can do to help them. Barnett calls together Zoe and David. She tells them that the oxygen in the ship can only last for 2 people and the one produced by David's algae can last 1 more person. She says they have to get rid of Michael or they will all be suffocated to death by carbon dioxide soon. Zoe and David try to come up with other solutions but none sound convincing to Barnett. Zoe asks Barnett to give her some time to come up with something and save Michael. Barnett gives her 10 days. She instructs them not to tell Michael. On the 3rd day, David tells Barnett that they need to play safe and get rid of Michael quickly. Barnett tells him she can't let that happen yet. While she cleans his wounds, Michael tells Zoe the story of how he lost his father and started caring for his little sister. Zoe feels guilty. David approaches Michael when he's alone and tells him everything. He gives Michael a medication for a quick, painless death. Michael starts to contemplate injecting himself with the drug. Zoe sees him with the drug and promises him that she won't let him die. She confronts David for what he did. David tells her he had no other choice since he already sacrificed his research to save Michael. He asks her what she had done on her own part, but Zoe says nothing and leaves the room. Zoe comes up with a plan to get some oxygen from a spaceship 450 meters above theirs. She tells David and Barnett about it. The first batch of David's algae are dead, so he has no choice but to join her. Barnett also agrees. She and David take 2 gas cylinders with them to the other spaceship. She discovers there's enough oxygen there to last the crew for the whole mission. She fills up the first cylinder and passes it to David. She's filling the second when Barnett receives a notification that a solar storm is coming. Barnett asks them to return with the first cylinder immediately. On her way down from the spaceship, Zoe trips and the cylinder falls into space. Disappointed and determined to save the crew, Zoe sacrifices herself to go back for the second cylinder. Barnett and David try to convince her not to go, but she doesn't listen. She fills the second cylinder and gets it to the spaceship. The movie ends with Zoe sitting outside the ship and dying slowly in the storm. You know this channel delivers the best content anytime. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to click on the like button. Punch on the bell icon to subscribe to this channel.